VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. We are about 5 or 6 days away from preseason game number 2, depending on when you are watching this. I want to dive into some roster stuff tonight because, as you probably know, as I always say, if you're watching a show like this, you are deep in the weeds of Vikings football. We will get a roster on August 26th, a 53-man roster, and checks notes that is only about 2 weeks away. So this show is dedicated to some of the sneaky Vikings, unsung dudes who could end up making the 53-man roster, with the disclaimer that not every single guy I name here is going to make it. But it's dudes to be thinking about that could be on a fringe version of the roster bubble. I've been doing this all week and I'm going to continue to do it. The book over on your screen is called The Motor Route. I wrote it. It is my first foray into fiction, and I want you to go read it, especially if you like suspense, thrillers, mystery, psychological fiction. The book is about 315 pages, and it's my first stab at this. My plan is to write 2 books per year until the end of my days when I'm, 80 something or whatever that will be. And this is the maiden voyage. The second book, called The Invaders, will be out in December, and that is unrelated to this title. But go to Amazon and spend your $4 on the ebook, 15 if you're into the paperback, and buy it and read it and come and let me know what you think. All right, on to the Vikings stuff for today. On Monday, 53-man roster. These are guys, I've listed them alphabetically, that if you were to sit down and get out a Microsoft Excel or a Google Sheet and crunch the numbers on your 53-man roster, these guys probably wouldn't factor into your end game, maybe, if you've got some hot takes, but they're ones I kind of want you to be thinking about that have the capability or the upside to make the dance in September. So the first one, a lot of these guys are undrafted free agent rookies, go figure. The first one is Silas Bolden. Now, I've backhandedly had my eye on Silas Bolden since end of April when he came on board as an undrafted free agent, because I like his size, his versatility, the way that he can play special teams, and I knew that because Brandon Powell doesn't work here and that Ty Chandler I think will be cut, I knew the team needed return men, and I think that was the purpose that Silas Bolden was signed. Fast forward to the preseason game, and Rondale Moore, the punt returner, on the very first play, blew out his knee, and we don't think he's coming back. Therefore, that to me opens up a roster spot for Silas Bolden at punt returner, and they even used him for the remainder of that first preseason game. He did not help his case when he dropped that pass from Max Brosmer. Should have caught that, but that's probably why he was undrafted, because he can't haul shit like that in. But Bolden can be a sneaky roster add, especially on a team right now that has a little bit of panic at wide receiver. If you look at the lay of the land, Justin Jefferson has a mild hamstring tweak. He'll be ready by September 8th, but it's worth noting that he has that. Jordan Addison will not play the first 3 preseason games. Some don't trust Jalen Naylor for 3 weeks worth of WR2 duty. And then the upstart Lucky Jackson, who will make the 53-man roster, has never played in a regular season game. That all compiles to say, is the team okay here for wide receivers with a quarterback, 22 years old, has never thrown a regular season pass either? There should be a roster spot for Silas Bolden because this team has question marks on its return men. Ty Felton looks like he'll do a decent job as a kick returner, but they still need a punt returner. If they don't go out and sign Brandon Powell, which to me feels like a no-brainer, they haven't done it yet, then I think Silas Bolden has a case for this roster. I should have said at the top of the show, disclaimer, sneaky Vikings, I don't have Xavier Scott because I think he's going to win the RB3 job. Everybody fell in love with him on Saturday. And then Lucky Jackson, in my estimation, is Mr. Mankato. It's not a hot take anymore that he's going to make the active roster because he's listed as the WR4 on the damn depth chart right now. So getting those two out of the way. After Silas and Bolden, I have Khalef Halazi. And the only reason I have him on here is because the Vikings moved him to safety here in the last few weeks or whatever it's been. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of times in preseason games, when a guy has like 2 interceptions like he did, or Albert Wilson had 2 touchdowns as a wide receiver 3 preseasons ago, sometimes those splashy plays, stats in a preseason game don't matter and the guy gets cut. But the reason I have Halazi on here as a sneaky Viking who could make the roster is they switched him to safety. If they knew that he was just kind of a camp body, wouldn't you keep him at cornerback and then just keep your other 5 safeties as is? There might be a undercover plan for Halazi to make this roster, and then they would have 5 safeties, but Halazi mans the special teams role, or is it's kind of weird that you'd have 5 safeties, the Vikings anyhow. But it's just intriguing to me that they switched him this summer from a cornerback, a lifelong cornerback, I believe, to a safety. So I wanted to call him out and give him his flowers too for the 2 interceptions in the preseason game, although it was against like incredibly bad quarterbacking with that Mertz dude. But Halazi deserves a call out, and because he made the most of his opportunity, and there is a world where this team needs more special teams help, Halazi is a sneaky Viking who could end up making the roster. The next one is probably the one I'm most excited about. So, throughout the spring and summer on VikingsTerritory.com, I've been building a quiet but steady case for Joe Huber to make the active roster. Sometimes you read a guy's scouting report, you check out the tape, you see that they came from a school like Wisconsin. You start to think, or even just his name, Joe Huber. That sounds like a guard, doesn't it? It's the last point about the name is like a real footnote, but there's something kind of like quarterbacks. Like I heard their name Drake May, I was like, that guy's going to be a star. I, on Joe Huber, this team, to me, go look at the depth chart. It needs another interior offensive lineman. Now, there are times where the team has just kept 3 guards or so, but right now you have Donovan Jackson slated to start, thank God, at left guard. Our new guy, Will Fries, at right guard. And then Blake Brandel is the other guy, but if you flipped on the game Saturday, his ass was playing tackle. And that leads me to believe that while Brandel can be versatile, other than Henry Bird or Vershawn Lee, the Vikings probably need one more depth guard. So, and then bada bing, today at training camp, our friend Sean Borman, who writes at Vikings Territory, has been on this show twice. Joe Huber was taking snaps at center, and it's like, okay, Zeke Correll broke his ankle. Huber, I didn't know played center, but if he has some of that training camp versatility, maybe they're going to groom him, audition him for that. But the bottom line, unless they just want to be skimpy in their interior offensive line depth, which goes against everything they've preached this offseason building the trenches, Joe Huber, to me, has an inside track for this 53-man roster because who else? Henry Bird, who's always on the practice squad? Are you going to go sign another guard? So although no guard got hurt, Zeke Correll kind of made the center spot a little skimpy. And on the whole, although we've spent all of our time this offseason patting the Vikings on the back for building the trenches on offense and defense, the depth and interior offensive line has been kind of a sneaky concern for me, and it leads me to believe they trust Joe Huber. And of all the ones I'm going to say on the show tonight, Huber is the one that I'm probably most excited about to make the 53-man roster. All right, the next, I got 3 more for this show this evening. Jashawn Jones, JJ apparently. The other JJ, Justin Jefferson, we have multiple JJs, was calling Jashawn Jones JJ when he did the commentary in the third quarter. And Jashawn Jones gets the case on a show like this for a sneaky roster ad because of everything I just said 5 minutes ago. If the Vikings don't sign Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham, trade for Trey Palmer, which I wrote about and endorsed today on VikingsTerritory.com, if they're going to roll with what they have at wide receiver, which if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, that's fine. I trust Keenan McCardell. Then you've got to have some bodies here, folks, because Addison's going to be out. Rondale Moore is no longer going to be in the equation. You look around at the landscape of the roster and you start to scratch your head. Who are the wide receivers going to be? So these guys that are at the bottom of the roster, like Thayer Thomas, Miles Price, Dante Fleming, I think the one that would have the most reasonable case for a audition 53-man roster would be Jashawn Jones. The first week of camp, he looked pretty damn good. I really wish Tristan Jackson was still on the team. He would be a guy right now that would slide seamlessly into WR5. Maybe he'll be cut by the Cardinals in 2 weeks and the Vikings can grab him back. But if they're going to stay within, promoting from within to fix this blossoming wide receiver issue, there has to be a dude like Jashawn Jones who's available. And if it's not him, then you're looking at Tim Jones, who had a disaster class with penalties in the preseason game. Or you just go sign somebody like Gabe Davis or Nelson Aguilar and call it good. All right, the second to the last one is at tight end. We didn't see much from Ben Urosek, who is the presumptive tight end 3 for your 2025 Vikings. That's fine. He's undrafted free agent, just didn't really get any targets, meaningful targets. I think there was one that was thrown in his feet. But Nick Vannett, he's been around for 6, 7, 8 seasons, and he's played a lot of football in the NFL, usually as, you guessed it, a tight end 3. Nick Vannett, because we don't really know anything about other than a college scouting report for Ben Urosek, Nick Vannett could be a guy that sneaks onto the back of this roster as your tight end 3, and then you have Urosek as a practice squad guy while you buy your time for Gavin Bartholomew's return, who we thought, because of his 6th-round draft stock, would take the Johnny Munt role. Right now, that's trending towards Urosek, but if they are not enamored with him in training camp or the preseason, Nick Vannett, he doesn't need a whole bunch of training. The guy's been around for quite some time, and he loves that TE3 role. That's what he plays everywhere he goes. All right, the final one, I have to add this one for our good friend of the show, Yannick Eckhart. Zamiah Vaughn, undrafted cornerback. The numbers or the 53-man depth chart math, it's a little tricky to find a spot for Zamiah Vaughn, because if they're going to roll with 5 corners, that means you're going to have to cut somebody like Dwight McGlothern, which I don't think anybody wants to do. Not going to cut Mekhi Blackman, certainly not the other 3 guys, and Isaiah Rodgers, Byron Murphy, and Jeff Okudah. But I'll say it this way. If this version of Vikings decides to keep 6 cornerbacks, Zamiah Vaughn would probably be the 6th guy. He has turned heads at training camp in a good way. It appears that he has the juice to have some NFL staying power. The scouting report, although he was undrafted, checks some boxes. So I will say, although I don't have him on my 53-man roster, I made one before the preseason game and the injuries to Zeke Correll and Rondale Moore. Zamiah Vaughn, if the Vikings keep 6 cornerbacks, probably don't include Khalef Halazi like I talked about at safety. Zamiah Vaughn could be a dude that fills the CB6 role, especially if they fear putting him on waivers in the practice squad, he'll get stolen by another team. So from top to bottom, several sneaky Vikings who could make the roster. Wide receiver Silas Bolden, mainly because of his punt return angle without Rondale Moore. Khalef Halazi, who they've shifted to safety, which tells me they have a grander plan for him than we once thought. Joe Huber, the Vikings need interior offensive line depth. I think it might have been the plan for Huber all along to make this roster. Just bumped up by Zeke Correll's injury. Jashawn Jones, because the Vikings are starved for wide receiver bodies. In my estimation, at least depth, not Jefferson Addison at the top of the ticket. Nick Vannett has been a tight end 3 for many, many years. This team doesn't have a Johnny Munt anymore. It would make more sense that they trust Vannett than Urosek coming out of the gate, and then Zamiah Vaughn, who is the darling for a lot of Vikings fans at training camp. That's all I have for the start of this week. I want you to go to Amazon.com, buy my book. If you have Kindle Unlimited, just get it for free, read the son of a bitch, and then come tell me if you like it or not. Skol, baby.